Wow, now that got me thinking. It looks like there are only two ways to stop the terrorist: war or science. Let's bring on the science. What we call an atmosphere is actually a mostly clear, barely gelatinous film that coats our planet. Acting like a windshield, it protects the planet as it travels over 1 billion miles around the sun every 2 years. Orbiting at 67,000 miles per hour, this film has to be durable, stable, and shielding. The Earth is also spinning at 1,000 miles per hour. The sun tows the Earth another 1,000,000 miles every day. Add to that, our galaxy is sailing through the universe, and this means that our planet Earth travels over 4 million miles every single day. We have to be protected from an amazing amount of space debris. The second most important rule for this film is to act like a giant cargo net. Something has to keep everything from blowing off the surface into a giant comet's tail. The temperature in space is minus 450 Fahrenheit degrees. It takes lots and lots of global warming to maintain the comfort we humans require. The molten core is over 2,200 Fahrenheit degrees. Maintaining the balance between the frightening chill of space and the inner sphere of magma is more violent than delicate. Too much heat, the atmosphere dissolves away, and we become Mars. Too little heat, the film freezes. An icy comet tail forms until all the ice has blown away, and we become Mars. Without a sun, Earth would be an asteroid. Temperature depends on distance from the sun. It's much hotter on Mercury and Venus than it is on other planets. In Pine Creek Gorge, the Grand Canyon of Pennsylvania, you can touch 400 million year-old rocks dating back to the Paleozoic era. The layers of this quarter-mile deep trench show us that ice ages occur on a regular basis. A very good explanation for that are the Milankovitch cycles. Jupiter has 67 moons and Saturn has 62 moons. Every 50,000 years or so, the moons group together in clusters. These clusters have gravitational pull, which causes the orbits of Jupiter and Saturn to shrink. The closer these two giant planets get to the Sun, the more powerful their gravitational pull on the Earth. This pull draws the planets further out into space, creating oval orbits. This lengthening of Earth's orbit eventually adds another 4.8 months to Earth's orbit. And because the Earth is traveling further away from the Sun, these extra 4.8 months are winter months. Not just regular winter months, but Ice Age months. The huge buildup of permafrost and glaciers is so large that there is not enough time for summer to melt it all. As the moons spread back out, the planets drift back away from the Sun and their gravitational pull gets weaker and weaker. This returns our orbit to a circle and the seasons we're used to. This means that no matter what happens, sooner or later there will be another ice age. Fortunately for us, the next one doesn't start for another 20,000 years. Besides direct sunlight, there is one other major temperature control system in place. The Earth is covered by 24 tectonic plates. There are more than 270,000 miles of cracks between the plates. These gaps provide access to a layer of searing hot liquid magma. We all know that when an object heats up, it expands, and when the same object cools down, it contracts. When the Earth warms above normal, the tectonic plates expand, and then when the Earth cools down, the plates contract. When the plates expand, there is less pressure on the magma, and with less pressure, there is less volcanic activity, and with less volcanic activity, less heat is produced by volcanoes. And of course, the opposite happens when the planet cools. The plates contract, creating more pressure, forcing more volcanoes to erupt, which warms the planet back up. It's like a giant thermostat. If it gets too hot, it turns the volcanoes down. If it gets too cold, it turns the volcanoes up. I'm going to call that the Grampa Effect. Since 80% of volcanoes are under the sea, increases in volcanic activity mostly warms the oceans. These changes in temperature create currents, and ocean currents are responsible for spreading that heat around the globe. This is efficient and eliminates hotspots. Ocean currents move heat, and that creates wind, and wind creates weather. And that's it. That's the big picture. There are some minor ways that temperature is maintained, like big water storms and outgassing, but it looks like the African Connection terrace plot is doomed to fail. No matter how much they burn, the tectonic plates will respond and adjust the temperature. Even though this makes total sense, I know there are some that think there must be more. Some middle school kid and her grandfather can't go against thousands of scientists, so let me show you how I got here. First, there was a heavy snowstorm of 2015. In the northeast United States, a tremendous amount of snow piled up, and that got me thinking. If the weight of all that snow caused a lot of downward pressure, there would only be one way to relieve that pressure: volcanoes. When several long, dormant volcanoes in and off the coast of South America erupted, I knew I was onto something. It just makes sense that there has to be something responsible for increases and decreases in volcanic activity. There also has to be some reason for the plates to move. If the temperature remained constant, there should be no movement. So, just like a tube of toothpaste, squeeze here, something comes out there. And it didn't take many eruptions to handle all that snow. And then there's the greenhouse effect. A real greenhouse has a clear roof that allows sunlight to pass through and heat any matter it shines on. But in a greenhouse, it's the walls that trap the warmed air by keeping it from blowing away. And since our atmosphere has no walls, we had to take a closer look. The rays of the sun heat molecules, and just like a sponge in water, heat is absorbed until the object is full or as hot as it will get. Excess heat then has to find a new place to go. In physics, the second law of thermodynamics says that heat flows from hot to cold. And since it is so cold in space, heat rises. Rising heat causes the air around it to move out of the way. That's how wind is created. And yeah, just like ocean currents, the sun's rays can heat water just like any other object. And when the water is in vapor form, also known as humidity, the water vapor can heat up, making the air as hot as the ground. And that's where the expression, "it ain't the heat, it's the humidity," comes from. And then wind blows the hot water vapor into the shade, and that's where we get the feels like temperature. So, with no walls or ceiling to trap the rising heat, it blows somewhere else looking for cold. Heat is never trapped. That means there's no such thing as a greenhouse effect. And that got me thinking. It's not really fair to call them greenhouse gases. The air we breathe is 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, and 0.93% argon. CO2 makes up only 0.04%, and the rest consists of methane, very small particles, and other stuff. It's kind of like a thin broth. That we can breathe this soup is another miracle, and since CO2 is the heaviest gas, it is constantly falling to a level where plants can absorb it. Go figure. When burning sends CO2 skyward, it only stays up there until it loses its heat, and then it's recycled into plant food. And that got me thinking. Humidity is part of the evaporation cycle. Water is always moving. That brought us to the carbon cycle, where burning recycles CO2 back into plant food. And then there's the nitrogen cycle and the oxygen cycle. There are cycles within cycles within cycles, like the 4 seasons and the Milankovitch cycles. According to NASA, water vapor accounts for about 50% and clouds another 25% of the stored warmth in the air. Homeostasis is the process where the environment remains balanced, stable, and comfortable, all by itself. With all that is happening, picking only two numbers, CO2 from man-made sources and temporary temperature variations, is very unscientific. I'm shaking my head. As my grandfather always says, the nice thing about numbers is that they're always in order. Add to that, the terrorists sure picked a bad time to try this. Sunspot activity peaked in April 2014 and is slowing down. This will have a cooling effect on the Earth. So they can't count on a greenhouse effect, and their numbers just don't add up. No matter how much CO2 they think they're throwing into the atmosphere, can never be enough to make a difference. Ever. All they will have created is a messy and inefficient way to produce electricity. Maybe they should spend more time not being terrorists.